Next on MLR Weekly, Seattle Seawolves and English Sevens legend Matt Turner on unions, CBDs, and the Springboks. Also, Bryan Ray of America's Rugby News with Bunker Madness, Toronto's big signing, and Major League Rugby rumors. And Rugby Morning's John Fitzpatrick with MLR headlines, moves, and more. Rugby Wrap-Up's MLR Weekly brought to you by Sheehy Auto Stores. It's easy at Sheehy. The Pig and Whistle, New York City, the world's best rugby pub. And Lean and Limber, stretching your way to a healthier lifestyle. Welcome to MLR Weekly, as presented by Rugby Wrap-Up. Matt McCarthy in New York City, and we've got a huge show for you once again this week. We have Matt Turner, Matthew Drew Turner, the legend out of the Seattle Seawolves and England Sevens, who happens to be half South African. He's complicated. We'll get to him. We also have Bryan Ray of America's Rugby News with all kinds of good stuff. And before we get to any of it, we have our recurring segment, Rugby Mornings Coffee Break with John Fitzpatrick, with all kinds of stuff. John, welcome. What do you got?
Hey, Matt, how you doing? I got to start with a question to you first, Matt. Did you hear the news about your boy Eddie Jones?
Mate, there is no news, mate.
Well, Eddie, now that you left the Wallabies, where are you going to go?
Mate, to the least expected place, mate. Least expected.
Happy trails to you, Eddie Jones.
Next!
Hey, Matt, speaking of Australia, there's a connection here with the San Diego Legion. Unfortunately, lock Ben Grant has left San Diego and will be plying his trade with the Hurricanes in Super Rugby. A big loss for San Diego, but a big get for the Hurricanes.
A big loss and a big get, literally and figuratively. He's a large man, and they don't grow on trees. They are trees. Next!
But San Diego Legion will be getting a player who's returning to Major League Rugby. Wing Ryan James, you may recall last time he was in MLR, he was with the LA Giltinis. Last season, he was with the American Raptors, but now he is back in Major League Rugby with the San Diego Legion.
Don't call it a comeback, and he'll find that last name once and for all when he's here. Next!
Let's keep the comebacks coming back. Old Glory DC, they announced that they have signed scrum half Ethan McVie. He's returning to MLR. Matt, you just gave me a curious look. What was that about?
Yeah, you sure it's not McVeigh?
It's McVie because I heard him say it on your show.
Next!
Hey, how about your boy Lance Williams? He's left the Utah Warriors. It looks like he's getting a stint or continuing a stint with the USA Men's Sevens. They've already qualified for the Paris Olympics, just like the women. It looks like he's going to try and get a run out there in Paris. Matt, what do you think of that?
I think he's a guy that was overlooked by the 15s team for too long. He's a good player. He's a very good player. And chasing a dream before that window closes, absolutely rooting for him. Always liked him. Next!
Matt, I'd be remiss if I didn't bring up that Old Glory DC announced the re-signing of flanker Lautaro Bavaro. The Argentine returns to Old Glory DC for the 2024 MLR season.
Great pickup, but how do you know when you're reading that it's not resigning instead of re-signing?
There's that little hyphen.
Is there a hyphen? Is there?
There's a hyphen.
Next!
Matt, before we close out this segment, that's right, I'm directing it now. I've got to ask you a question about the Rugby World Cup.
Yeah.
The 2023 Rugby World Cup champion Springboks, are they the greatest rugby team of all time?
Well, it's one of those hypotheticals that you can't really answer because we don't live in an age where we can go back in time and have those players play against the current players. But, the gradual change in physical bodies because of workouts and resources, you'd have to give those teams out of the past those same resources. But I would love to see the 2011 All Blacks healthy, because they won with a fourth-string fly half whose jersey didn't fit him, and they managed to win a World Cup. Had they been healthy, they would have been really lethal, and I'd love to see them matched up against this Springboks team. Next!
Matt, that is all I got. Looking forward to next week as we talk about the USA Men's Eagles as they return to action for 2 games in that Spain mini tournament.
Yeah, very excited about it. It looks like the Eagles are going to get some more games, 9 to 11 per year, which would be fantastic. Finally getting some real competition, getting some reps, getting into camps. That'll be good for the game. And on that note, John, I think we're out of time with you. Yes, we are out of time with you, so let's take a break, and we'll be right back right after this.
Digs like a demented mole there.
Need a great price on a new vehicle? Sheehy makes it easy. Easy Price shows you our lowest prices on the Mid-Atlantic's largest selection. Find your best price online or at any of our 31 dealerships.
It's easy at Sheehy. Sheehy.com.
You need your cleats? You need them tomorrow? If you order today by 3 p.m. New York time or noon LA time, they can have them to you tomorrow. Young, old, male, female, if you're playing on turf, if you're playing on grass, if you're playing in the rain, you're playing in the heat, they've got you covered. RugbyNow.com. Go there now. And we're back, and we have the pleasure to bring in one of our favorite all-time guests, Mr. Matthew Drew Turner. He recently of the Seattle Seawolves. He's, of course, an England Rugby Sevens legend, despite the fact that he's South African. Matthew, welcome back to MLR Weekly.
No, it's great to be back. Thanks for having me again. It's always a pleasure talking to you, chewing the yarn, as I like to say.
One quick question before we get started. Did you cover your England rugby tattoo with a Springboks tattoo, or are you putting them next to each other?
You know what? It's one of those things when I've now won, 5 World Cups? So, good.
That's a record. In the England-South Africa match, who are you rooting for?
Oh, no, England. It's what our household is. My mother and myself, we are England supporters. My dad and my sister are South African supporters. So it's a bit of an uphill battle. It's been it's going to be a long 8 years now. I'll probably only go home. What is that? 2027, I'll go home and say hello to my dad, but we'll delete my sister's number. But, I've been getting memes from my sisters, telling me about the score again. And, end of the day, I kind of half won.
But you had to be rooting for South Africa against New Zealand, right?
Oh, yeah, definitely. 100%. That wasn't even a discussion. When you got people like Bradley Tucker in your lives who tell you New Zealand are the best rugby team ever gracing this earth, anything just to drop them a little message, a little reminder that who sits on top. Well, kind of on top.
Well played. All right, let's get down to the nitty gritty because the title of this is Destroying Matt Turner. That's what this segment is. But it's hard to destroy a guy with your resume because you played in 3 MLR finals and you played for England Sevens and you just keep retiring and keep coming back and showing. Oh, that looks like Turner on the pitch, Bob. That is Turner on the pitch, Bob. Are we going to be saying that this year? Are you playing this year?
No, not this year. I know I've told you this for the last...
You have said that every year for the last 4 years.
I've made a purpose of emptying my house out of rugby boots. If I did play, you would see me running on the field with things we call career savers. You see them in the NFL. The NFL refs all wear them. So if you see a pair of those, then I'm back on the field.
This might be a stretch, but is getting rid of your rugby boots part of a 12-step program?
Oh, wow. I like that. It's not bad. Yeah, smarter than you look, to be fair.
Early in the morning, baby.
Yeah.
This is how we roll. This is how we roll. November's here, baby. November's here. With that resume, you are highly qualified to discuss many topics. And the first one I want to touch upon is the Rugby World Cup. What did you make of the bunker? Because I'm afraid MLR execs are going to say, hey, that bunker thing's a great idea. What is your take on the bunker? And how come Khaleesi's card wasn't red if Kane's was red? Thank you.
Yeah, on the bunker stuff and all the stuff Rusty and Jock have been doing, I think it's making the game, they're doing it within the rules. They're playing the system. They've balancing their team with the correct players for the challenge they see ahead. So I with the 7-1 split sort of stuff, I don't mind that as well, because if you look across the board and the talent that they have on the field, there's people that can play multiple positions. Sia Khaleesi, there was mitigation, right? He did drop into the tackle. The body weight shift was there, where Sam's was a one-on-one hit. Do I think it should have been a red card? By the letter of the law, yes. But, situationally, the moment, the game, maybe not.
Let's go back to the MLR. What is that you think the MLR needs to do in this upcoming season, improving league-wise?
I think we're talking about growing the game, and the on-field product is definitely growing. And, most teams are putting in a concerted effort to grow the game around the States. But maybe that needs to be something that's slightly more formalized, with an 8-year goal right now. With the World Cup coming in 8 years, we've got 8 years where we need to fill the stadiums. We need to get into all the local councils. We need to try and get, for us in Seattle, I can use this as an example, we need to try and get all these turf fields that are getting re-turfed to have rugby lines on them. But that's the biggest image issue with the league from a game point of view, is you turn on the TV and if I'm a first-time watcher, I'm seeing 1,000 lines. It's that first image of all these rugby lines, because they don't know any different, right? And then from a community point of view, it's just about getting our numbers back up from post-COVID. It's about helping the club games, which most teams are doing now, but having a centralized concept that we can run out across the country so that it's consistent.
A template, if you will.
Yeah, a plug and play.
Yeah.
The nice thing is the game's growing even with these. We've got to be positive. I think sort of the next cycle, 4 years, a lot's going to change. I'm hoping more teams come in and new markets. I'd love to see like an Ohio team in there. I think that's always a good spot. There's no real.
The Aviators, Columbus, Obets.
Yeah,
it's organic. It happened. They got to tap back into that. What's your take on the unionization thing? The players forming a union.
In my side, personally, there's two parts to it. The league's not profitable. The league's not in a position to be unionized, in my mind. I think a lot of things are going to affect current people's contracts that other people don't know about. That's from a league point of view or a team point of view. From a player's point of view, there's a difference overseas between an association.
And you mean like perks and stuff, perks that are like legal perks?
All legal perks, right? I mean, I just use cars as an example.
Not the envelope under the table.
No, all legal stuff. If I'm getting a car in my deal and someone else isn't getting a car, you technically have the right to ask for a car, or the other person has to give up the car, is my understanding of the union in America. A union back home isn't this, is an association here. I think an association makes more sense.
What's the difference? Because I only have a University of Buffalo education. I can't grasp the explanations.
So an association is a membership where if you're part of this, you get access to lawyers, to discounts. There might be a Ford might sponsor it, so you might be able to get a discount on Ford, or you've got a bank attached to it. So HSBC is attached to the RPA in the UK. You get premium banking for free. And then a union is basically, you think of Ford and what GM and everyone are going through. That's because the union are asking for a collective raise. So everything's done as a collective. So even if you don't agree with it and you're a union and the union votes, over the percent threshold they need, you're in it, whether you signed into it or not. And that's what I don't like. It takes away it takes away the ability to negotiate or have decisions made on your behalf of the league as an individual. The collective bargaining thing makes sense in theory in my mind, but the league's just not ready for it.
So let me ask a different version of Matt Turner. If Matt Turner is 20, would he have a different outlook on it?
You'd have to be. If I'm 20, I'd have to ask to be fully educated. Not
Is that Rucky in the background?
You're gonna have this big rubbish truck coming past again now.
I hear squawking too. Is that Rucky?
That's that's Full Mac. He's coming back.
Canadian scrum half Full Mac. Phil Mac. Yes.
Yeah. You just want all the information. It's been coming in bits and bobs. I know it's obviously it's technically a startup, but it's going to affect a lot of people if it goes through. Players hat on, I would say this is a good idea, but the league needs to be more established for this to actually have its full effect of what it should do.
Interesting. What does John Q. Player understand this? The regular guy in the clubhouse, does he get the gist of what's going on?
To an extent, I've had conversations. I don't mind if you want to vote for it or not. It doesn't really. I won't ever try to sway someone. Some guys are just like, oh, I'm just going to sign it without understanding it, that's a bit worrying for me. To be fair, I'm sure the guys who are setting the union up will, once the league gets going, they'll ramp up their communications with the players, because I'm not sure how active they've been with the individual. It's more as a whole. Yeah, it's just a clarity on around exactly what they wanted to do and what the main goal is, and how this is going to help the growth of the game, not put a speed bump into where it's going.
Interesting. As always, Matthew Turner, thank you for being interesting, and thank you for being you, sir.
Of course, anytime.
By that note, thank you to Mr. Matt Turner. We have to take a break. We'll be right back.
I wouldn't like to be at the bottom of that.
If you're in New York City and want to watch some great rugby, have some great food, and some great times, go to the world's best rugby pub, the Pig and Whistle on West 36th Street.
This is the Rugby Odds, where an unlikely pundit panel of a wordsmith, a WWE legend, a rugby star, and a supermodel scour the globe, seeking best bets and bad behavior. Are you not entertained? And once again, we have the pleasure of welcoming in the rugby god that is Bryan Ray of America's Rugby News, straight from Halifax, Nova Scotia, which means New Scotland. Bryan, how are you?
Doing just terrific, Matt. Terrific.
You don't look like you're doing terrific. You look like you got some things on your mind, and we're going to try to pick apart those things on your mind. But let's start first with what you want to start first with, Bryan. Any news on your guys that played in the Rugby World Cup? No, because none of us watched the England versus Argentina match.
Yeah, wow. Tomas Cubelli started the game. Miguel Sanchez came off the bench. I watched 0 minutes of that game because I didn't care at all. So I don't really have any comments on how it went, but I'm looking forward to seeing them play for Miami.
Yeah, and we do understand why the players will play in that match, because it could be the last time they're wearing their nation's uniform, or they're getting a nice paycheck, specifically if you're the English players. So, it kind of makes sense for them to play it. I just don't think the match should be played.
Yeah, I get why they do it. It's more for money, I think, than saying goodbye to players. But nobody cares about it, let's be honest, except the guys who take part in it. But that's about it.
Now, in the final, there was some controversy on the Sam Cane card being bumped up to a red, and maybe Khaleesi not getting a red after they had set the precedent earlier with Sam Cane getting the red. What's your view on those cards?
They're completely different situations. I mean, you look at them, they're clear as day to me. I mean, I'm not saying I necessarily agree that Sam Cane should be sent off for that, but I'm saying that as it's written and as it's been refereed for I don't know how long now, that's a clear-cut red card. I don't think there was any way to get away from that, unfortunately. Now, if you want to say that this whole World Cup has highlighted the need to revisit this whole head contact situation, I agree. It's over the top, and I think they're starting to realize that. And if you're going to complain, like my complaint about that final, you can complain about the kicking and that kind of thing, and people are always whining about how long scrums take and lineouts take. My complaint, even with this bunker situation, we're still slowing the game way down to make these refereeing decisions that are often quite marginal.
Or the decision's coming like 15 minutes later.
Yeah.
And reversing everything that's happened.
I'm just, that stuff frustrates me.
All right. Let's go back to the MLR on this side of the pond. What news, what topics, what subjects, what caught your eye this week?
Well, I think the big one has to be that the Arrows finally unveiling their head coach, Steve Meehan, coming in. Great acquisition. I mean, you have to say, look at his resume. I mean, yeah, he's been in, GPS in the Queensland Premier League, which is, I guess you could say club rugby. But, I mean, this guy is coached at the very top levels of the game in all three. I mean, the big ones, top 14, English Premiership, Super Rugby. I don't think you can ask for a lot more than that. So in terms of experience, I think it's great. I hope, and I can only assume that he's coming in with his priority to be making this a competitive rugby team in Major League Rugby and not this is Canada's team. I have to fit in X amount of Canada's players. That's nice and all, but can we please move past that and say this is the Toronto Arrows playing in Major League Rugby. Right. That's your focus. Make them a good team. And I'm sure that's the discussion that's been had with them. And they put it in the press release saying how he recognizes the importance of Canadian rugby. Yeah. Let's get out of there. Let's just make this a good rugby team. And I think they've made the right decision in hiring him.
All right, I want to change gears a little bit because I've been talking to different people on both sides of the aisle on this conversation. What is your take on the unionization for the MLR players as opposed to a players association? Players Association union, I'm told by some people that's the same thing. I'm told by other people it's not the same thing. What's your take on this whole thing right now?
I'm educated enough to make a decision on. I will say I think that MLR to this point, at least publicly, has not done a good job of kind of connecting with that Players Association as it is. And I think they should have done a better job in speaking to them and not gotten to this silly. I think that the thing that last people want to see is this, social media posts from one association, one side, the other, name calling stuff. That's amateur stuff. I wish they had not gone to that. So I think there has to be better dialogue between the two, certainly.
I am very, very concerned about this. And I've been trying to read up on things and try to get some opinions from different people and try to figure out maybe figure out how we can get the sides together and not have what could be a catastrophe. And we're at such an embryonic stage in this whole league and owners hemorrhaging cash. And I get the players having, legitimate complaints and concerns. But I think that, we if we were in a room with a keg, kind of like the college rugby landscape thing, we could solve it. And I think these people have to start talking to each other more and share what their concerns are and then say, oh, you know what, well, we can do this. And the big thing here is that, again, it gets back to the United States not being something that you can, or a place where you can take an existing model from overseas and apply it. Same with Canada. These are huge countries. You have, as you said, the one box ticked about healthcare, right? We don't have that here, and it's very expensive. So again, I'm a little bit above my purview here, but the basics are that you have workers' compensation as the insurance for players in the league. So that's like an on-the-job, you get hurt thing, right? And then you apply for workers' comp, and workers' comp will then take over the case and give you the surgery and the rehab. And it allows the team to use that salary cap, that's space from your injury once you're on workers' comp, to bring in somebody else, right? And we've seen that happen across the board. The real complicated thing, though, is workers' comp is different in every state. So like some states, the cost of the workers' comp is like 2.1 times the salary cap, whereas in other states, it's a fraction of that. So it's across the board. And what they've been doing, the owners, is they've been pooling monies into the comp, the workers' comp pool, so that it kind of spreads it evenly amongst the 13 teams. And the irony is that Toronto, which has health care, was paying in. And that's just workers' comp. That means you're only when you're hurt on the job or during the season. It doesn't include off season, and it doesn't include family. So this is the trick, where this is one of the sticky points or obstacles, right? So that's kind of it in a nutshell for that piece of the disagreements. So, but when you speak to everybody, they all understand, and they all empathize. But we got to eliminate the public wars, and we got to get into the rooms and talk before we derail this thing. And I'm really worried about it. All right. Well, what else you got for us, Bryan?
Well, I hear there's going to be more interesting things going on with the schedule. I know we've kind of already discussed the delay in the playoffs. That seems to be coming. It sounds like there might be a shakeup in the actual setup as far as conferences goes. That's going to make things interesting. I'm certainly very interested in seeing what the schedule is going to look like, and certainly how they approach the playoffs, if that is the case, if there is kind of a reshuffle. So, that's always interesting when you've got teams that have already been doing recruiting and everything, thinking they're going to be matching up against team this, that, competing them for playoff spots, and all of a sudden it's reshuffled. So that's going to be interesting. I mean, at the end of the day, you want to have the best team.
We also might have the first domino effect of South Africa winning the Rugby World Cup, and Rassie Erasmus with his 7-1 split off the bench with the 7 being forwards down in Houston with the Sabercats, because they are loaded with forwards.
Unreal. I mean, they've adding Justin Bisson and Johan Momsen and Ronan Murphy. I mean, all these guys are coming back too. Marno Redlingice and, Emmanuel Albert, Siasi. You can't fit all these guys in one scrum. So
they're going to play in the back line.
I think we might see the first 7-1 bench. I actually might have to look. There might have been a 7-1 maybe by accident, and it might have been by Houston already. I'm going to have to check that out.
That might have been because of
sake.
like a domestic international thing,
Yeah, maybe. But maybe we'll see more of it. If any team's going to do it, it's going to be Houston, because they are absolutely stacked in the forwards this year. They're going to be a bruising team.
On that note, Bryan, we are basically out of time once again, unfortunately. So I want to thank you, sir, Mr. Bryan Ray of America's Rugby News. Also want to thank Mr. John Fitzpatrick of Rugby Morning and Matt Turner of the Seattle Seawolves and England Rugby Sevens legendership-ish. And thank you for tuning in. Check out our other programs, including the critically acclaimed The Rugby Odds, the College Rugby Wrap-Up. Hit that subscribe button on YouTube. Please tell your mates about us. Sign up for that weekly newsletter, and please join our American Red Cross Blood Donor Team.